Members, House Bill 3816 provides a number of basic reforms to the Texas Medical Practice Act, ensuring that all regulatory actions undertaken by the Texas Medical Board are unquestionably fair, impartial, and transparent to all parties. There will be those who stand up and make this case that this bill will somehow infringe upon the rights of patients and undo tort reform. Let me assure you, it will not undo tort reform. Tort reform was a constitutional amendment. This bill protects the rights of physicians and upholds the fundamental constitutional principles of the right of due process. This bill is about what is best for the doctors and patients living in the state of Texas and nothing else. When doctors are forced to continuously defend themselves against frivolous or malicious complaints levied against them by their competitors, insurance company, or personal rivals, many will choose to simply leave the state. This greatly reduces the general availability of health care in parts of the state and increases the overall cost of care.
Chair Gonzalez, and I've heard from my doctors who might go through the process for years and they don't know who brought the complaint, but they end up going through the process and then ultimately they find that there was no merit. And if that happens, is there any disincentive for the person who filed the complaint? Is there no fine assessed, nothing like that?
No, ma'am.
There's no remedy, because I know one of the complaints I've heard is the amount of money that is spent hiring counsel and so forth going through the complaint process.
Yes, ma'am.
So.
You know what we see every session, and you led the charge last session against TxDOT, so many agencies, they're going to do whatever we want them to do for 140 days. And then after 140 days, they do what they want to do, and they don't deal with it until we come back the next time. So we see that over and over and over again.
Chair calls Daniel Munton, M-U-N-T-O-N, a physician testifying on his behalf. How did I say that?
It's Munton, Dr. Munton.
Dr. Munton, yes. Welcome.
Thank you. I was a former partner with Dr. Roberta Caliphate, who was the president of the Texas Medical Board, and her husband, Dr. Ed Brandecker, for approximately 4 years. I then voluntarily chose to resign from that practice due to what I felt was unethical actions taken by her and her husband. She repeatedly and openly shared intimate details about physicians that came before her as the president of the board. She would do this in front of myself, our staff, and even to non-medical personnel at social gatherings. Dr. Caliphate once told me she was going to have her husband turn in an anonymous complaint about a physician practicing in Abilene into the medical board. She stated she could not be the one to turn him in because of her position on the board, but would help write the complaint and then have the husband turn him into the board. She stated she would then recuse herself from the case due to him practicing in Abilene. Upon hearing of the punishment in the case, she stated she was going to call other board members and convince them to make the punishment more severe. I then heard this conversation take place. She also shared details of cases involving a previous colleague of mine who had ongoing complaints in front of her at the board. I told her I thought this was inappropriate to discuss other physicians' cases that were before her at the board and asked her to stop telling me about his or other cases before her at the board. She, however, continued to speak about his case and went as far as to laughingly speak about his case in front of me and our staff. I told my former colleague of her actions, but due to his ongoing case at the Texas Medical Board, he did not feel he could take action against her at that time. After my resignation, I moved my family from Abilene to Illinois to serve out a one-year non-compete agreement. I then chose to return to Abilene in 2006 after fulfilling my contractual agreement. On February 3rd, 2006, upon hearing of my expected return to Abilene, Dr. Caliphate's husband, Dr. Brandecker, sent me a letter stating, "I suppose had you not considered returning, I would have let bygones be bygones." I interpreted this and other statements as a disguised threat and statement of disapproval for me to return to Abilene to be in competition with them. So after never receiving a single complaint in over 11 years of treating patients, upon returning to practice in Abilene and after receiving what was, in my opinion, a threatening letter from a former partner, within 3 months I had received 3 anonymous complaints to the Texas Medical Board, where one of my former partners served as president. At this point, I felt completely helpless with the entire process. It was at this point that I learned of a hearing taking place where physicians and patients statewide convened with the Texas legislature to discuss the actions of the Texas Medical Board. It is my understanding that at this hearing, Dr. Califoot refused to answer the question as to whether or not she had a role in turning me into the medical board. Shortly thereafter, my complaints were completely dismissed, but not until pending for over a year and after a tremendous amount of time and expense were incurred. The current process allows the physician no right to know who his accuser is, nor does the physician have the right even to know the specific accusation brought against him or her. The complainant does not have to disclose his relationship they may have with the one they are accusing, such as a competitor situation.
Let me ask you a quick question. Is there a deterrent to having patients turn in their physician if it's not anonymous?
Well, I believe, the dental board at this current time actually has that process where you see the accusation made against you and you actually see your accuser. So it works in their case. The complaint, if it's brought and it has merit, is going to go the full distance and actually have the intended consequence of causing something to change with the physician's behavior. Having a completely anonymous approach to the way we do it right now, it doesn't matter if you're an insurance company, a competitor, a disgruntled spouse, and they can do it until the cows come home. You have no stopgap. You have to answer, you have to disprove a negative if it's a fictitious complaint, and it can never stop. So if it's anonymous and they continue to do it, there's no downside to them doing it. If it's dismissed in the end, there's no consequence to the person who brought the fictitious complaint.
My name is Elizabeth Norgal, College Station, Texas. I represent a large network of patients with chronic illnesses, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and in particular, late-stage chronic Lyme disease. And I've worked with this patient group for 15 years. Now, these patients, they're homebound. There are a few little groups in major cities, but we meet on the internet. We meet in cyberspace.
Lyme disease case?
In particular, chronic Lyme disease. I wanted to downplay that because it's broader. The patients who are too debilitated to travel or who are too impoverished because of chronic health conditions are at a tremendous disadvantage. They have to accept second-rate care with cheap, generic palliative medications, many of which addictive painkillers, addictive mind and mood-altering drugs, but that do not really correct the problem. The reason for this is insurance companies don't want to pay for these chronic conditions, and so they are passing the cost on to the taxpayer. So this is running up our Medicare costs. If these patients had access to quality medical care, many of them can get back on their feet and they would no longer be on disability and welfare. So what's happening? The insurance companies are ducking their responsibility and using the medical board to file these anonymous complaints. My daughter's case is very unusual. I became involved because she was ill since a very early age, missed all 4 years of high school on the homebound program. It took 25 years to get her properly diagnosed and another 10 years to get her adequately treated. I know that these patients can be helped. She's 90% well 90% of the time. So I know that with adequate treatment, we can get some of these patients off the welfare rolls. We have to have the doctors be unafraid. As it is now, they are fearful of persecution, prosecution, take your choice, by the medical board. House Bill 3816 will help to ensure that we abide by Article 16, Section 31 of our Texas State Constitution, which protects the different schools of medical thought. And right now, that has been ignored by the medical board under the guise of standard of care cases. But if you have different schools of medical thought, you're going to have different standards of care. And they are basically ignoring that which is guaranteed to us in our Texas Constitution. So it would be a great benefit to have the sunshine and transparency and to guarantee that patients' rights as well as physicians' rights to due process are not abrogated. I thoroughly encourage you. There's been a lot of time and effort put into this bill, and it's a good bill, and I encourage you to pass it because it supports Article 16, Section 31 of our Texas State Constitution. Thank you.